So the FBI works for the White House?
No, the FBI is a member of the Department of Justice.
President Trump's made clear in public statements he wants to use the FBI to persecute political adversaries. He's publicly said that folks ranging from Liz Cheney to Adam Kinzinger to former Vice President Harris should be investigated and criminally prosecuted. The month before this, in July 2023, you said there should be a criminal referral for FBI Director Wray. If confirmed, are you going to follow through on these previous statements that Director Wray needs to be prosecuted?
This wasn't a shouting match, but it quickly became a test of independence. Senator Chris Coons repeatedly pressed Kash Patel on one question. If the White House crossed the line, would he push back? Here's how that tense exchange unfolded.
In particular, a conversation about the prosecution of the World Cup bombing in Uganda that took the life of a Delawarean whose family I knew. I found moving. But the role you've been nominated for is central to our security as a nation, central to the protection of our constitutional rights. And I voted to confirm Trump's previous FBI director, Chris Wray. I believe he's lived up to the Bureau's motto of serving with fidelity, bravery, and integrity. And I also think my vote for him and for many of Trump's cabinet in his first term shows I take my constitutional advice and consent role seriously and do not reflexively vote against his nominees. I look at three factors when I assess a nominee: qualifications and experience, policy views and whether they're in the best interest of the American people, and character and capacity to do the job independently where called for. My colleagues have referenced quotes from Attorney General Barr, National Security Advisor Bolton. The FBI is enormous, 38,000 agents, $9 billion budget. I am troubled by your lack of senior law enforcement leadership. We disagree on some important policy views, but the thing that bothers me the most is a whole series of statements you've made in a variety of settings that suggest you would struggle to be independent from White House direction or control, as has long been the modern history of the FBI. Who does the director of the FBI work for, Mr. Patel?
Senator, thank you for that question. The immediate report for the director of the FBI is into the Office of the Deputy Attorney General. Then that report is taken into the Office of the Attorney General and ultimately the White House and the chain of command there.
So the FBI works for the White House?
No, the FBI is a member of the Department of Justice and has been the long-standing application.
And who does the Department of Justice work for?
They're in the executive branch, as all members do at the White House.
Attorney General Bondi gave a different answer when I asked her the same question, that they work for the Constitution and the American people.
The conversation starts respectfully, but Coons quickly shifts to the issue he cares about most, whether the FBI answers to the Constitution or political leadership. That's where the hearing begins to tighten.
President Trump's made clear in public statements he wants to use the FBI to persecute political adversaries. He's publicly said that folks ranging from Liz Cheney to Adam Kinzinger to former Vice President Harris should be investigated and criminally prosecuted. If President Trump were to order you to open an investigation into any of these individuals, let's say Vice President Harris, would you?
Senator, this question speaks directly to my ability to leave political bias and allow independent behavior to be the only guiding light. As a public defender, I learned that in the harshest of arenas. And any law enforcement investigation, if I'm confirmed at the FBI, will only be launched on the following qualification: a factual, articulable, legal basis to do so. The president has said publicly that he will allow the FBI to remain independent, and I have said as much as well.
So if FBI agents brought to you a factual, legal basis, predication, and you are about to refer it to a prosecutor, and you get a call from the White House saying, don't proceed. This is a major donor. This is someone close to the president. This is inappropriate. What would you do?
Simple. I think you answered it partially in your question. The line agents, the brick agents who are trained to bring investigations on behalf of the FBI will make that decision-making process, and they will only have my full support so long as it upholds absolutely every value of the Constitution. And that's it.
Now the questions become much more specific. Instead of discussing general policy, Coons presents a hypothetical scenario designed to test how Patel says he would handle political pressure if confirmed.
So your predecessor, I went back and looked, and I asked the same questions of Director Comey and Director Wray. Director Wray, quoting former Attorney General Bell, said you should be willing to resign if necessary over conduct if you're pressed to engage in it that's unethical, illegal, or unconstitutional. If pressed by the president, would you resign?
Senator, my answer is simply I would never do anything unconstitutional or unlawful, and I never have in my 16 years of government service.
Would you be willing to resign the post of FBI director if pressed and given no choice but to obey the order or resign?
Senator, I will always obey the law.
Does obeying the law require you to, as Attorney General Bell said, as FBI Director Wray said, refuse the order or resign?
I'm not familiar with the extent of the law that you're referring to, but my answer is simple in my 16 years of government service. We will simply follow the law. And I've done that in Obama Justice Department, in Republican Justice Departments, in the Obama military, in Republican civilian capacity. I have never once wavered from my constitutional oath of office.
Mr. Patel, your predecessors in this role have been clear that they would be willing to resign if forced or directed to do something unethical or illegal. I'll proceed.
This section focuses less on investigations and more on leadership. Coons compares Patel's answers with those of previous FBI directors, looking for a clear commitment about what would happen if an unlawful order were ever given.
One of your past statements that's concerned me, it's both a post on Truth Social and something you said in a podcast, the Sean Morgan report, that your predecessor, Chris Wray, has broken the law. We need to prosecute him. The FBI should go after people like him. And the month before this, in July 2023, you said there should be a criminal referral for FBI Director Wray. If confirmed, are you going to follow through on these previous statements that Director Wray needs to be prosecuted?
Senator, this reminds me of the conversation you and I had, which I greatly appreciated. There is enough violent crime in this country and enough national security threats to this country that the FBI is going to be busy going forward preventing 100,000 overdoses, 100,000 rapes, and 17,000 homicides.
We agree that prosecuting violent crime should be the principal focus of the FBI. What I'm trying to get to, Mr. Patel, is a whole series of very troubling, to me and many other statements you've made about instead using it to pursue those who might be viewed as political opponents.
And as I told you in your office, I have no interest, no desire, and will not, if confirmed, go backwards. There will be no politicization at the FBI. There will be no retributive actions taken by any FBI should I be confirmed as the FBI director. I told you that in your office, and I'll tell you that again today.
Thank you for that statement. As the co-chair of the Law Enforcement Caucus with Senator Cornyn, one of the things I've worked hard on, and I hope to continue being able to work hard on with this administration, is partnership between federal, state, and local law enforcement to pursue violent crime.
The discussion now shifts from hypothetical situations to Patel's own past public statements. Coons questions whether those comments are consistent with Patel's promise that the FBI would avoid political retaliation.
You did say, as my colleague asked, and I look for a longer answer, that you want to close the FBI Bureau's headquarters on day one. How would shutting down the FBI headquarters impact its ability to prosecute violent crime and drug traffickers? How is that possibly a serious proposal, Mr.
Thank
Patel?
you for bringing that up and allowing me to answer. It was to highlight the significantly greater point that I was actually making in that interview, which is well documented over and over again. 38,000 FBI employees. 7,500 FBI employees work in the Washington field office and Hoover building alone. If you increase that aperture just slightly to encompass the National Capital Region, that is 11,000 FBI employees work in the National Capital Region. A third of the workforce for the FBI works in Washington, D.C. I am fully committed to having that workforce go out into the interior of the country, where I live, west of the Mississippi, and work with sheriff's departments and local officers, and having one agent prevent one homicide, and having one agent in Washington prevent one rape. And I will do that over and over and over again because the American people deserve the resources, not in Washington, D.C., but in the rest of the country.
And Mr. Patel, frankly, if that had been your statement, that would be something that would be defensible. It's the rest of it, saying you're going to turn it into a museum of the deep state, that causes repeated questions and concerns from people like myself. Thank you, Mr. Patel.
The hearing wraps up with a debate over one of Patel's most talked about remarks. Patel explains the proposal as a plan to redistribute FBI resources across the country, while Coons argues that the language surrounding the idea continues to raise concerns. This exchange was noticeably different from many of the sharper moments seen during the hearing. rather than focusing on rapid interruptions or dramatic confrontations. Senator Chris Coons structured his questions around a single theme: the independence of the FBI. From the opening moments, he acknowledged Patel's nomination and previous conversation with him before turning directly to what he viewed as the central issue. His questions consistently returned to whether the FBI director should operate independently of political influence, regardless of who occupies the White House. One of the first points raised involved the chain of command. Coons asked who the FBI director ultimately works for, and Patel described the organizational reporting structure within the Department of Justice and the executive branch. Coons contrasted that answer with one he said he had received from another nominee, emphasizing the idea that the FBI's ultimate responsibility is to the Constitution and the American people. That difference in framing established the direction of the remainder of the exchange. Another important moment came when Coons presented hypothetical situations involving possible political pressure. Instead of asking about past events, he described scenarios in which a president might seek to influence an investigation or discourage prosecutors from moving forward. Patel responded by repeatedly stating that investigations must be based on legal and factual grounds, and that career FBI agents would continue to follow established investigative standards. While he emphasized adherence to the law, Coons continued pressing for a more direct answer about whether Patel would resign if ordered to take an unlawful action. Patel consistently returned to the position that he would simply follow the Constitution and the law. The hearing then shifted toward Patel's own previous public statements. Coons referred to comments Patel had made about former FBI Director Christopher Wray and asked whether those remarks suggested an intention to pursue political investigations. Patel rejected that characterization and instead emphasized that, if confirmed, his priorities would be violent crime, national security threats, drug trafficking, and protecting the public. That exchange illustrated how nominees are often questioned not only about future plans, but also about years of previous interviews, podcasts, books, and social media posts. One of the final issues involved Patel's comments about FBI headquarters in Washington. Critics interpreted some of those remarks as symbolic attacks on the Bureau, while Patel explained that his underlying proposal was to move more FBI personnel into communities across the country where they could work more closely with local law enforcement. His explanation focused on resource allocation rather than the symbolic language that had attracted attention. Coons acknowledged that the staffing argument itself could be debated, but explained that the additional rhetoric surrounding the proposal was what continued to concern him. Looking at the hearing as a whole, neither participant dramatically changed positions. Coons repeatedly sought clear commitments about independence from political influence and accountability to the Constitution. Patel consistently argued that he would follow the law, support career investigators, and focus FBI resources on public safety rather than political disputes. Their disagreement centered less on the importance of the law and more on whether Patel's previous public statements were fully consistent with those assurances. Confirmation hearings often serve exactly this purpose. Senators use them to examine how nominees explain previous comments, defend their judgment, and respond to sustained questioning under public scrutiny. Viewers may reach different conclusions after watching this exchange. Some may feel Coons effectively highlighted issues that deserve clarification, while others may believe Patel adequately explained his positions and addressed the concerns raised. Regardless of where people stand, the hearing demonstrates how nominees for major law enforcement positions are expected to publicly explain both their past statements and their future commitments before assuming office.